My beloved brothers and sisters, marriage in Islam is a gift, a trust from Allah Almighty. It is not meant to be a prison nor a battlefield. It is meant to be a garden of love, mercy and tranquility. Allah says in the Qur'an, and from His signs is that He created for you spouses that you may find peace in them, and He placed between you love and mercy. But what if that mercy is gone? What if the home becomes a place of pain, disrespect and disobedience to Allah? If your woman is consistently mocking your faith, discouraging you from salah, from corn, from halal living, then know, my brother, she is pulling you away from Jannah. No love on earth is worth losing the pleasure of Allah. If she lies to you, betrays your trust, plays with your emotions, then understand that marriage cannot stand on deception. Islam honors honesty, dignity and trust. Without these, the bond crumbles. If she is constantly disrespectful, belittling you, mocking your family, spreading negativity day and night, ask yourself, is this the tranquility Allah promised, or is this punishment? Yes, Islam teaches patience, advice, gentle reminders. We don't just give up. We try with wisdom, we seek help, we make dua. But if the harm continues, if the heart is poisoned, and if your deen is at risk, then walk away. Leaving is not failure. Leaving a toxic, destructive marriage can be salvation. The Prophet A taught us that Allah has not placed your peace in something that brings you harm. So, my brothers, value your faith, value your dignity, value your peace. A woman who helps you reach Jannah is priceless. But a woman who drags you to Jahannam, the sooner you walk away, the safer you will be. Marriage in Islam is not simply a social contract or an arrangement between two individuals. It is a sacred bond that Allah Almighty Himself has described as a sign of His greatness. When Allah tells us in the Qur'an, and from His signs is that He created for you spouses from among yourselves so that you may find tranquility in them, and He placed between you love and mercy. Surely in that are signs for those who reflect. It is a reminder that this relationship is unlike any other. It is supposed to be a place where two souls find peace, where love and mercy are not just emotions, but acts of worship that bring them closer to Allah. The foundation of marriage in Islam is not wealth, not status, not looks, not fleeting desires. It is built upon mercy, respect, and mutual assistance in obedience to Allah. When these qualities are present, the home becomes a sanctuary, a place where both husband and wife feel safe, valued, and spiritually uplifted. Mercy is not weakness. Mercy is the ability to overlook small mistakes, to forgive shortcomings, to recognize that the person you are living with is human, with faults and flaws just like you. Respect is not one-sided, it flows both ways. The Prophet Muhammad treated his wives with honor and dignity, never raising his hand against them, never insulting them, never making them feel less. Instead, he was gentle, he would help in the house, he would listen to them, and he would acknowledge their feelings. That is why when we say the foundation of marriage is mercy and respect, we are following the Sunnah itself. Without this, the marriage becomes nothing more than a contract on paper, void of life and soul. A true Islamic marriage is not about domination or control. It is not about one partner silencing the other. It is about being garments for one another. As Allah describes, they are clothing for you, and you are clothing for them, just as clothing protects, beautifies, and gives comfort. A spouse is meant to protect the honor, cover the weaknesses, and bring comfort to the soul of the other. When a man and woman forget this divine purpose, marriage becomes a struggle for power rather than a journey towards Jannah. The home should not feel like a battlefield. It should feel like a prayer mat, a place where Allah is remembered, where forgiveness flows, where love is expressed through kindness and care. In Islam, even a smile to one's spouse is considered charity. A kind word is sadaqah. Serving each other in small ways is an act that earns reward. The Prophet showed us that nurturing love is part of faith. He raced with his wife Aisha, may Allah be pleased with her. He spoke to her with gentleness. He treated her with dignity. If the messenger of Allah, the leader of the Ummah, could lower himself in humility and treat his spouse with mercy, what excuse do we have to be harsh, arrogant, or disrespectful? The foundation of marriage must also be spiritual. A wife is not just a companion in worldly matters. She is your partner in the journey to the hereafter. She should encourage you to pray. When you are lazy, remind you of Allah. When you forget, hold your hand in times of hardship and rejoice with you in times of ease. The love that is rooted in Allah does not fade with wrinkles or gray hair. It strengthens with time because it is tied not to the body but to the soul. That is why our predecessors used to say that marriage is half of faith. Why? Because through marriage you learn patience, sacrifice, forgiveness, and discipline. You learn to prefer someone else's comfort over your own. You learn to deal with difficulties with sabr and with gratitude when things go well. All of these qualities are fundamental parts of faith itself. Without this foundation of mercy and respect, the relationship quickly becomes toxic. When love is replaced with harshness, when forgiveness is replaced with constant criticism, when respect is replaced with humiliation, the heart begins to suffocate. Islam never intended marriage to be a place of torture. That is why Allah reminds us, if you truly cannot live together in kindness, then separate with dignity. Because even separation is better than destroying each other's souls with cruelty. This is how important the foundation is. If you get it right from the beginning, you will find that most other problems become easy to solve. If the foundation is rotten, no amount of wealth, gifts, or apologies can keep the building standing. We must remember, brothers and sisters, that the relationship between husband and wife is a reflection of their relationship with Allah. If a man fears Allah, he will never abuse his wife. If a woman fears Allah, she will never disrespect her husband. If both of them love Allah, they will love each other in a way that is pure, gentle, and lasting. That is why building the marriage on taqwa, on mercy, and on respect is essential. This is not just good advice. It is the command of Allah. A marriage built upon anything else will either collapse or become a source of endless pain. But a marriage built upon mercy, love, and respect will not only survive storms, but will turn those storms into opportunities to grow closer to each other and closer to Allah. When we speak about the signs of harmful behavior in a marriage, we are not talking about small misunderstandings or human errors that every couple faces. Every marriage has moments of disagreement, moments of frustration, and moments where patience is tested. That is natural. But when harmful behavior becomes consistent, intentional, and toxic, then it is a red flag that cannot be ignored. Islam has taught us that marriage is built upon respect and dignity, and once those qualities are replaced with mockery, humiliation, and disregard, the very foundation of that marriage begins to shake. One of the clearest signs of harmful behavior is when a woman mocks the religion. If she belittles Salah, makes fun of you for trying to practice Islam, discourages you from reciting Qur'an, or considers obedience to Allah as backward or unnecessary, then this is not just disrespect towards you, it is a rebellion against the Deen itself. A spouse is supposed to be your partner in faith, someone who encourages you to become closer to Allah. If instead she pulls you away from the masjid, away from halal living, and pushes you towards haram entertainment or habits, then she is harming not just your peace, but also your akhirah. No one should allow love of dunya or love of companionship to blind them to the reality that being dragged away from Allah is the worst harm of all. Another sign of harmful behavior is when she constantly belittles you. A marriage should be a safe space where you feel valued and respected. If your wife constantly mocks your efforts, insults you in front of others, makes you feel worthless, or compares you to others in a humiliating way, this is not a sign of love. Words can break the heart just as surely as blows can break bones. A believing woman is taught to respect her husband, not to trample on his dignity. When respect is lost, bitterness grows. And once bitterness takes root, peace in the home disappears. Dishonesty is also a destructive habit. When promises are made and constantly broken, when lies become normal, when there is manipulation in speech and actions, then trust is destroyed. Trust is the backbone of marriage. Without trust, there is no security. If she hides important matters from you, betrays your confidence, or deceives you in matters of loyalty, then the marriage is already poisoned. The Prophet Muhammad told us that honesty leads to righteousness and righteousness leads to Jannah. If dishonesty becomes a norm in the house, it only leads to misery. Harmful behavior also appears when there is arrogance and constant negativity. Some women may think belittling their husbands or showing superiority will gain them control. But this attitude only kills love. A home where arrogance replaces humility is a home where mercy cannot settle. If every small issue turns into criticism, if every mistake is magnified, if gratitude is never shown, then the heart of the husband begins to feel heavy. Instead of the home being a place of relief after a long day, it becomes another battlefield. Allah has commanded gratitude and humility between spouses because arrogance and ungratefulness destroy the blessings Allah places in the home. We must also speak about disrespect towards family. In Islam, ties of kinship are sacred. If your wife constantly insults, mocks, or tries to sever your relationship with your parents and siblings without valid Islamic reason, then this is a sign of toxic behavior. Yes, boundaries may be needed if family members cross limits, but encouraging enmity and hatred is not from Islam. A spouse who genuinely cares for you will never want to see you cut off from those whom Allah has commanded you to honor. Another harmful sign is when she uses emotional manipulation as a weapon. Constant threats of leaving, blackmailing you emotionally, or using silence and withdrawal as a tool to control your behavior. These are unhealthy tactics that harm the soul. Marriage is meant to be about open communication and mutual understanding, not games and mind control. When manipulation replaces sincerity, the relationship suffocates. We cannot forget neglect of Islamic values as well. If she openly neglects her obligations, refusing to pray, mocking hijab, engaging in shamelessness, spreading gossip, or encouraging haram in the household, this is destructive not just for herself, but for the entire family. A mother is the first teacher of the children. If she is careless about Deen, then the children will grow up seeing Islam as unimportant. Such negligence has a generational effect, and a husband who truly fears Allah cannot ignore it. At the same time, harmful behavior is not defined by one mistake. Everyone slips, everyone sins, everyone has flaws. But when the pattern is constant, when there is no remorse, no effort to improve, no care for how her actions affect her husband, then it is no longer a simple weakness. It becomes a sign of a poisoned heart. Islam teaches us to give advice, to show patience, to make dua, to try reconciliation. But if the harmful behavior persists and the home becomes a place of darkness, then one must remember that Allah has not created marriage as a prison. He has created it as a means of mercy. When mercy is absent and harm becomes the norm, then Islam allows the door of separation to protect faith, dignity, and peace. A woman who constantly mocks Deen, belittles her husband, destroys trust, and manipulates with arrogance is not fulfilling the purpose of marriage as Allah intended. Recognizing these signs is not about being harsh, it is about protecting the soul. The worst mistake is to normalize toxic behavior and remain in a situation that endangers one's faith and mental well-being. The Qur'an and Sunnah have given us guidance. Hold on to patience, give sincere advice, but never allow yourself to be broken by continuous harm. Trust is the lifeline of any marriage, and once it is lost, the relationship begins to suffocate no matter how much love may remain. In Islam, marriage is not just a contract written on paper, it is a covenant witnessed by Allah, a sacred promise to live with honesty, dignity, and loyalty. Without trust, that promise becomes meaningless. When a woman consistently breaks trust, lies, or betrays the sanctity of her marriage, it creates wounds that are far deeper than any argument or disagreement. These wounds are often invisible, but they bleed the heart slowly until the husband finds himself living in constant doubt, suspicion, and sorrow. Betrayal can take many forms. The most obvious and severe is infidelity, where a woman betrays her husband's honor by giving her attention, loyalty, or love to another man. In Islam, this is not only a sin against the husband, but a grave sin against Allah, because marriage is meant to protect chastity and honor. A husband who finds himself deceived in this way feels not only pain but humiliation, and the trust once broken is rarely restored to its original state. Even if forgiveness is extended, the shadow of betrayal lingers. This is why Islam emphasizes modesty, loyalty, and safeguarding the marital bond with the utmost seriousness. But betrayal is not always as clear as infidelity. It can also come through constant dishonesty. If a wife lies repeatedly about small or big matters, if she hides the truth, manipulates words, or deceives her husband, then she is slowly eroding the very foundation of their relationship. Lies are poisonous. They may seem harmless at first, but once exposed, they create a permanent scar of doubt. Every time she speaks afterward, the husband wonders, is this the truth or another lie? This constant suspicion destroys peace of mind and replaces love with mistrust. The Prophet taught us that truthfulness leads to righteousness and righteousness leads to paradise, but lying leads to sin and eventually to hellfire. A household built on lies is a household heading towards destruction. Another form of betrayal is when promises are made but repeatedly broken. A woman may assure her husband that she will fulfill certain responsibilities, keep certain boundaries, or respect certain values, yet she continually fails without remorse. Breaking promises is a serious matter in Islam. Allah describes in the Quran that among the traits of the hypocrites is that when they make a promise, they break it. In marriage, this behavior signals not only a lack of reliability, but also a lack of respect for the husband's trust. Over time, the husband begins to feel that his words carry no weight, that his expectations are never met, and that his wife's commitments are empty. This slowly extinguishes his sense of security in the relationship. Trust is also broken when loyalty is compromised. A wife who constantly shares private matters of her husband with others, whether friends or family, is betraying a trust that Islam has commanded to be preserved. The Prophet warned against exposing the secrets of one's spouse, describing it as one of the most serious betrayals. A marriage thrives when both husband and wife feel that what is shared between them remains sacred, hidden from the eyes and ears of others. When this privacy is violated, the sanctity of the home collapses. A man who cannot trust his wife with his secrets, his weaknesses, or his private life will slowly withdraw from her, creating an emotional distance that is very difficult to repair. Another betrayal comes in the form of financial dishonesty. If a wife misuses money, hides debts, or spends recklessly without her husband's knowledge, she is violating the trust placed in her. Islam grants women financial rights, but it also teaches responsibility and honesty. When financial betrayal takes place, it not only creates conflict, but also destroys the man's sense of security. He begins to fear that his hard work and provision are being wasted or misused, and this fear eats away at his peace. The pain of betrayal is not only emotional, it is spiritual. A husband who is betrayed finds it difficult to concentrate in prayer, his mind consumed by suspicion and sadness. He begins to lose confidence in his own choices, questioning whether he deserves love or respect. The betrayal of a wife can affect his connection with Allah because his heart is weighed down by constant grief. That is why Islam places such importance on loyalty and honesty in marriage, for without these qualities, the soul suffers. Of course, Islam encourages forgiveness, patience, and giving chances. No one is perfect and everyone makes mistakes. But when betrayal becomes a pattern, when dishonesty is habitual, when loyalty is consistently violated, then the marriage transforms into a source of misery rather than mercy. Allah has not commanded us to remain in situations where our dignity, trust, and peace are continually crushed. A man who experiences repeated betrayal has every right to reconsider the marriage. Islam allows separation not as a failure, but as a means of protection. It is better to live alone in peace than to live together in a prison of doubt and pain. Trust is like glass. Once shattered, you may piece it back together, but the cracks will always remain. A wife who values her marriage must guard the trust of her husband as a treasure. She must be honest even in small matters, loyal even in moments of temptation, and sincere even when it is difficult. Without trust, no amount of wealth, beauty, or status can keep a marriage alive. With trust, even the smallest home can feel like paradise. A husband should never ignore the signs of betrayal, for closing his eyes to the truth will only prolong his suffering. Islam teaches us to seek peace, to uphold dignity, and to protect our faith above all else. When trust is lost and betrayal continues, it is a clear sign that the relationship is no longer fulfilling the purpose for which Allah created it. When a woman disregards Islamic values, she begins to undermine the very essence of what marriage in Islam is meant to be. Marriage is not just a social bond, it is a spiritual partnership designed to help both husband and wife draw closer to Allah. When one partner neglects this purpose, the entire household begins to drift away from its foundation. Disregard for Islamic values is not limited to neglecting a few rituals. It is a deeper problem that reflects an attitude of carelessness towards Allah's commands. A marriage where the Deen of Allah is treated lightly becomes a house without light, no matter how beautiful or wealthy it may appear from the outside. One of the clearest signs of disregard is the abandonment of Salah. Prayer is the pillar of Islam, the very act that distinguishes a believer from disbelief. If a wife consistently neglects her prayers, refuses to pray, or even mocks the importance of Salah, then she is cutting off her connection with Allah and leading the household into darkness. A husband who tries to maintain his Salah while his wife openly neglects hers will feel a deep imbalance because he knows that the one closest to him is not helping him toward Jannah but pulling him further from it. The Prophet said that the first thing a person will be questioned about on the Day of Judgment is their Salah. If this is disregarded, then how can the foundation of a marriage remain strong? Disregard for Islamic values also appears in the form of encouraging haram. If a wife pressures her husband to engage in things forbidden by Allah, such as dealing in interest, consuming haram food, neglecting hijab, or indulging in indecent entertainment, then she is becoming a source of fitna rather than a source of mercy. A believing woman should be someone who shields her husband from sin, not someone who tempts him towards it. When she treats haram as something light, when she encourages gatherings of gossip, when she fills the home with music and shamelessness instead of Qur'an and Daqqa, she creates an atmosphere where Allah is forgotten. And any home where Allah is forgotten becomes a playground for shaitan. Another form of disregard is neglecting modesty. In Islam, modesty is not only about clothing, but about behavior, speech, and attitude. If a wife dresses in ways that expose her beauty to non-mahram men, if she speaks flirtatiously with strangers, if she spends time on social media in inappropriate ways, then she is not only harming herself, but dishonoring her husband. A man's dignity is tied to his wife's chastity and modesty, and when she disregards this, he feels humiliated. Islam has placed immense honor on women, but that honor is safeguarded only through modesty. A woman who disregards this value is exposing herself and her family to harm. Disregard for Islamic values also includes neglecting family duties that Islam has emphasized. If a wife constantly disrespects her husband's parents without cause, refuses to raise the children upon Deen, or neglects the responsibilities of maintaining the home with dignity, she is failing to uphold the amana that Allah has placed on her. Yes, she is not a servant and she must be treated with kindness, but part of mercy in marriage is fulfilling roles with sincerity. When she shows no care for the upbringing of her children in Islam, when she allows them to grow up without prayer, without Quran, without manners, she is not just harming her marriage, but an entire generation. We must also reflect on the danger of arrogance when it comes to religion. Some women may adopt the attitude that no one can judge me and use this as an excuse to continue neglecting Islamic obligations. This mindset is itself a disregard for the Deen, because the believer's heart should always feel humility and eagerness to improve. A wife who disregards advice, mocks reminders, and shows pride in disobedience is not just hurting her husband, but harming her own soul. The Quran describes such arrogance as a path to destruction. It is important to remember that disregard for Islamic values does not always happen suddenly. It often begins with small compromises. A missed prayer here, a neglected fast there, a little gossip, a little indecency, until eventually the heart becomes hardened and the values of Islam are no longer a priority. If a husband notices that his wife is constantly sliding in this direction and she refuses to listen to gentle reminders, then he must recognize this as a serious sign of danger. Islam teaches us to give naseehah, to advise with kindness, to pray for guidance, and to be patient. But when all efforts fail and the wife persists in neglecting Allah's commands, then her disregard becomes a poison that may eventually destroy the marriage. A marriage that is rooted in the remembrance of Allah is filled with barakah. The Quran is recited, the Salah is established, the hearts are purified, and mercy flows between husband and wife. But when Islamic values are abandoned, Even the smallest issues turn into constant conflicts. Without Allah in the center, egos clash, anger flares, and the home feels like a battlefield. This is why the scholars have always emphasized that the most important quality to seek in a spouse is Deen. Beauty fades, wealth disappears, status changes, but Deen is the anchor that keeps the ship steady in every storm. If a wife disregards Islamic values persistently, it is a sign that she is not fulfilling the role Allah created her for in marriage. She is supposed to be a garment, a helper, a partner in righteousness, someone who aids her husband in pleasing Allah. If instead she leads him away from obedience, mocks the commands of Allah, and prefers the dunya over the akhirah, then she is failing to uphold her side of the covenant. At that point, the husband must ask himself whether staying in such an environment is protecting his faith or destroying it. Islam allows patience, forgiveness, and effort, but it never commands a man to sacrifice his deen for the sake of staying in a marriage where Allah's laws are trampled. Disregard for Islamic values is not a small matter, it is the root of all other harms. Once deen is neglected, respect, trust, and mercy all begin to vanish. That is why the believer must remain alert and never normalize a home where the name of Allah is forgotten. Toxic manipulation and abuse in marriage are among the most painful experiences a person can go through because they do not just hurt the body, they wound the heart and soul. Islam has given us a vision of marriage built on tranquility, mutual mercy, and dignity. When instead of these qualities, the relationship is dominated by manipulation, arrogance, and emotional harm, the home ceases to be a sanctuary and becomes a place of torment. A man who faces this from his wife must recognize that such behavior is not only destructive for the marriage, but also for his faith and mental well-being. One form of toxic manipulation is emotional blackmail. This is when a woman uses guilt, threats, or constant complaining to control her husband. Instead of communicating openly, she may say things like, "If you loved me, you would do this," or "I will leave you if you don't give me what I want," or she may withdraw affection completely to force him into submission. These tactics create a climate of fear and insecurity. The husband feels pressured, not loved. He obeys not because of respect or genuine care, but out of fear of losing peace. Islam teaches that communication in marriage must be based on honesty and compassion, not control and fear. Using manipulation to get one's way destroys trust and eats away at the love that marriage should foster. Another toxic behavior is arrogance. A wife who constantly acts superior, dismisses her husband's feelings, or belittles his efforts is practicing a form of emotional abuse. She may always insist that she is right, refuse to admit mistakes, and treat her husband as though he is incapable or insignificant. This behavior is rooted in pride, and Allah has warned us that arrogance is a trait He despises. The Prophet said that a person with even an atom's weight of pride will not enter paradise. In marriage, arrogance kills mercy. Instead of working as a team, the relationship becomes a struggle where one seeks to dominate the other. Consistent negativity is another sign of toxic abuse. Some women may find fault in everything their husband does, no matter how hard he tries. They criticize constantly, belittle his achievements, and rarely show gratitude. The Qur'an teaches us that gratitude increases blessings, but ingratitude drains them. A husband who lives under constant criticism begins to lose confidence and joy. The home becomes a place of tension rather than comfort. Allah did not create marriage for partners to be each other's tormentors. He created it so that they uplift one another. Gaslighting is a modern term, but its essence is old. It is when someone manipulates another into doubting their own perception of reality. In a marriage, a toxic wife may deny things she clearly said or did, twist situations to make her husband feel like he is always at fault, and make him question his own memory and sanity. This is a severe form of manipulation because it not only damages trust, but also undermines a man's self-worth. Islam emphasizes truthfulness and justice, and gaslighting is the opposite of both. It is oppression with words and deception, and oppression in any form is forbidden. Some women also use silence as a weapon, withdrawing affection or communication for long periods in in order to punish their husbands. While taking time to calm down after a disagreement is normal, intentionally using silence as a form of control is toxic. The Prophet encouraged reconciliation and warned against cutting ties for more than 3 days without reason. Marriage requires communication and understanding. Prolonged silence as a weapon only builds walls between hearts. There is also financial manipulation, where a wife may misuse her husband's earnings, hide expenses, or demand beyond his means with no concern for his struggles. While Islam grants women financial rights and independence, it also commands responsibility and fairness. When finances are used as a tool of control or pressure, it creates deep resentment and stress. A husband who works hard to provide deserves appreciation, not exploitation. Abuse is not always physical. Sometimes the scars of emotional abuse are far deeper than those of physical harm. Constant humiliation, insults, comparisons with other men, threats of leaving the marriage or using the children as pawns are all forms of abuse that crush a man's heart. Islam has forbidden oppression in every form. The Prophet, he said, "Do not oppress and do not be oppressed." A wife who uses her position to torment her husband is stepping into the realm of zulm, and Allah has promised that He will hold oppressors accountable even within the privacy of marriage. A toxic wife may also try to isolate her husband from sources of support such as his family or friends, making him feel dependent only on her. While healthy boundaries are sometimes necessary, intentional isolation is a way of control that can weaken his sense of self and independence. Islam encourages maintaining family ties and community bonds, not cutting them off out of manipulation. The damage caused by toxic manipulation and abuse is long-lasting. A man subjected to such behavior loses confidence, peace, and sometimes even his connection with Allah because his heart becomes too heavy with grief. Marriage, which was meant to be a protection, instead becomes a burden. This is not the Islamic vision of family life. Of course, Islam encourages patience, advice, and attempts at reconciliation. A husband should try to advise his wife gently, pray for her guidance, and seek counseling if necessary. But if the manipulation and abuse continue, if the wife shows no remorse or willingness to change, then he must remember that Allah has not made marriage a prison. To remain in a toxic environment that destroys one's iman and dignity is not obligatory. Walking away from persistent abuse is not failure. It is sometimes the only path to healing and peace. The believer must protect his heart and soul above all else. A wife who manipulates, abuses, and poisons the marriage is not fulfilling her role as a garment, a source of mercy, and a partner in faith. Recognizing these behaviors for what they are is the first step to protecting one's dignity. Marriage should lift you towards Jannah, not drag you towards despair. When a marriage begins to face hardships and harmful behaviors become visible, the Islamic way forward is not to react with anger, vengeance, or immediate separation. Islam has given us a path of wisdom, patience, and justice when dealing with difficulties in the marital bond. Allah Almighty describes marriage as a relationship of mercy and tranquility, and even when that mercy seems hidden under layers of pain, Islam encourages steps that can help restore it before making any final decision. The purpose of these steps is not to prolong suffering, but to ensure that every effort is made to preserve the marriage if it can be saved, and to part with dignity if it cannot. The first step is patience. Every marriage will face tests, and no spouse is perfect. A husband must learn to distinguish between human flaws and destructive behaviors. If the issues are small, such as differences in personality, habits, or misunderstandings, patience and gentle correction are enough. The Prophet himself advised men to overlook many shortcomings, reminding them that no believing man should despise a believing woman. If he dislikes one trait, he may appreciate another. This teaching is crucial. Not every flaw is a reason to leave. Many can be endured with patience, love, and understanding. Along with patience, sincere advice is required. Islam encourages communication, but communication that is filled with wisdom and kindness. A husband should sit with his wife, express his concerns calmly, and remind her of Allah and the purpose of marriage. He should explain how certain actions are hurting him, not with harshness, but with compassion, because advice given with a soft heart reaches much deeper than words spoken in anger. The Qur'an describes believers as those who enjoin one another to truth and patience. And this applies most importantly inside the home. If advice does not bring change, Islam encourages gradual steps. The Qur'an in Surah An-Nisa gives a clear framework. First, advise them. If that fails, then show displeasure in ways that are dignified, such as distancing in the bed. This is not to punish, but to signal seriousness. If even that fails, arbitration is recommended, where family members from both sides are brought in to mediate and help reconcile. The wisdom in this is that sometimes an outsider's perspective can resolve issues that seem impossible within the couple's private circle. Islam recognizes that human beings may fail in communication, so it gives the option of involving trusted elders. Throughout these steps, the husband must make dua. Guidance comes only from Allah, and hearts are in His control. A man should pray for his wife's guidance, pray for his own patience, and pray for Allah to place love and mercy back into the relationship. Sometimes the test of marriage is meant to increase one's closeness to Allah, to remind the husband that he cannot change anyone's heart by himself, but he can beg the one who created that heart. However, Islam is also realistic. If after all efforts the harmful behaviors persist, if the wife continues to disregard Deen, betray trust, or abuse her husband emotionally or spiritually, then Islam opens the door to separation. Divorce is not encouraged lightly, but it is not forbidden either. It is a mercy from Allah that allows two people to escape a bond that is causing more harm than good. The Prophet said that divorce is the most disliked of permissible acts, meaning it should be the last resort, but still a valid resort. Staying in a toxic marriage that destroys faith, dignity, and peace is not required by Allah. On the contrary, protecting one's iman and mental health is part of the husband's duty to himself and his Lord. If separation does become necessary, Islam instructs that it must be done with kindness and dignity. The Quran says, either retain them in kindness or release them in kindness. This means no insults, no revenge, no humiliation. A man should not speak ill of his wife after divorce, nor should he seek to harm her reputation. Whatever pain was endured, he must remember that she was once his companion, and Allah will hold him accountable for how he treated her even at the end. True dignity is shown not when love is strong, but when it ends. Can a man walk away while still upholding justice and mercy? The Islamic way forward also means learning from the experience. Marriage is a journey, and every hardship carries lessons. A man must reflect on what went wrong, on what he can improve in his own character, and on how he can make better choices in the future. Sometimes Allah allows a painful marriage not to break a man, but to strengthen him, to make him more conscious of what matters most: faith, respect, and sincerity. It is also important to understand that separation is not the end of life. Many men fear leaving a harmful marriage because they worry about being alone, about community judgment, or about starting again. But Islam teaches that Allah is al-Wakil, the best disposer of affairs. If a man sacrifices for the sake of his deen, Allah will replace what he lost with something better, whether in this world or the next. A man who walks away from harm to protect his iman is walking towards Allah, and Allah never abandons those who choose Him over dunya attachments. The Islamic way forward, therefore, is a balance between patience and firmness, mercy and justice. It begins with gentle advice, continues with practical steps, is supported by dua and effort, and if necessary, ends with dignified separation. At no point does Islam endorse oppression, humiliation, or endless suffering. Marriage is meant to be a source of peace, and when it becomes the opposite, the Sharia provides a way out. A husband who remembers these steps will not act rashly nor endure abuse blindly. He will walk the middle path, guided by the Qur'an and Sunnah, always seeking Allah's pleasure. And in that, whether the marriage is saved or ended, he will find peace in knowing he followed the way that Allah has prescribed. The lesson in all of this is clear. Marriage in Islam is not a game, nor is it a prison. It is a sacred trust, a partnership built on faith, mercy, and respect. If a woman uplifts you in your deen, values you, and stands by you with sincerity, she is a blessing to be cherished. But if she mocks your religion, breaks your trust, manipulates you, disregards Allah's commands and turns your home into a place of pain, then you must recognize the signs and protect yourself. Islam teaches patience, advice, and effort, but it never commands you to destroy your soul in the name of marriage. The Qur'an reminds us, and live with them in kindness. But if you dislike them, it may be that you dislike a thing and Allah brings through it much good. This means try with kindness, try with patience, but if all fails, Allah has allowed you to part in dignity. Protect your faith, protect your peace, and remember that the one true purpose of marriage is to help you reach Jannah. Any relationship that pulls you away from Allah is not worth holding on to. Your heart, your deen, and your akhirah are too valuable to be sacrificed. Thank you, everyone.